I'm Mike Kelly from Project Healing Waters Omaha, and tonight we have a special guest, Chris Krueger. Chris Krueger is a native of Fort Collins, Colorado, where he owns and operates Rocky Mountain Fly Design. He's a signature fly designer with Montana Fly Company and pro team member with Whiting Farms and Regal Vices. His flies have been published in magazines, articles, books, and fished around the world for trout, bass, carp, pike, snook, stripers, muskie, and more. He's been featured in a variety of fly fishing and fly tying shows, including the Fly Fishing Show, the International Sportsman's Exposition, West Denver Trout Unlimited Tying Expo, numerous Trout Unlimited chapter presentations and expositions, Bass Pro Shops, Shields Fly Fest, and a number of fly shops tying demonstrations and classes, and then youth programs throughout the year. Some of his flies, I was kind of looking earlier today. I mean, they're featured in Blue Ribbon Flies, Madison River Fishing Company, and Charlie's Fly Box, Charlie Craven. So he's got some real legit patterns, and some of them he's going to show us tonight. He was kind of focusing on things that would work well in warm water presentations, but also would work good for trout. So with that, I'll hand it over to Chris and spotlight him.
We're going to go to one of my favorite flies for bass. Absolutely one of my go-tos for everything that bass trout. It's my number one bass pattern is the Mardi Craw. And if you followed me for some time, Mardi Craw has probably been out for I think MFC picked it up in 2018, 2019. And they do the first version of it. The one that we're going to tie tonight is the second version of it. The first version of it comes in a number of different colors. They picked up 4 that are still available now. This olive and blue combination is a really great color combination. They do it in an olive and orange color on there. They do a black kind of ghost color on there with blue legs. And then they do a tan and brown coloration on there as well. And when I was designing this fly, what I was looking for was something that they had just come out with these 3D beads. And the 3D beads are a plastic articulation bead, just like those teardrop beads. Hairline came out with them. And what they are is they're a plastic bead used for articulation and are kind of coated in what I've heard is an automotive paint that really reflects. And I was looking for something that was going to pop in stained water, but also just be a general attractor pattern for bass, for trout. One of the biggest trout that I've caught is come on this fly, as well as just countless bass. I fish it more than probably any other pattern. We've got a lot of crayfish, and I absolutely love crayfish patterns. But these are the beads. This is the package that you get. They're called 3D beads. You can get them from any hairline dealer, and I do them in a number of different colors that I'll show you. But my number one choice for our waters around here is an olive and blue, and a number of the crayfish that we have in the Colorado area are really standard down to a couple different colors, and that's olive is the number one, brown, tans, and then some really dark colorations once they get into kind of some deeper water. But this pattern was developed, kind of came to me in the middle of the night of I wanted something that was really highly segmented, that was an attractor pattern used for stained water, but had a really natural fall to it. And the guides that I have given this to, and the number of people that fish it, the feedback that I get onto it is that it falls very naturally in the water. And so it is quickly found the number one spot in my box and quite a few other people, honestly. But this is the Mardi Craw. We're going to do the 2.0 version, which has some claws and some extra stuff going on with it. So we're going to start off. You can choose your style of hook. MFC does them on their MFC Gallup, Kelly Gallup hooks. It's just a straight eye. Daiichi is a 2461 with a straight eye. You just want something that's got kind of that Aberdeen bend that's going to allow you to get the beads over the top of it. So this is a partridge reddish universal predator hook. This is in a size 1, little shorter shank than some of the other streamer hooks, and I really like the gap on it. It's also a thinner hook. We don't have real crazy large bass that I need to worry about bending out a hook here in Colorado. So what I'm looking for is the ease of penetration. And I really like this thinner hook. Not only does it, I can use it for trout and not have to worry about it really tearing up a trout. It penetrates easily. It's nice and sharp. It's strong for what I'm using it for. If I'm using it for something bigger, I'm going for some bigger bass, I'll go ahead and bump up the size of this or the strength of the wire. So I'm going to use the brown 3D beads. And what I'm going to do, I'll try to do this on the camera here, is I'm just going to take these 3D beads and I'm just going to thread them on top or onto the hook, and they get stuck about right there until you pop them around, and then they'll go onto the hook. Okay.
Chris, do those beads have larger holes on one side than they do on the other, like a standard bead?
They're just straight drilled through. No extra side on one or the other, same size. So that's kind of, you want to make sure that you've got enough clearance on this backside with the bend to make sure that those beads will go around there. Okay.
So I would say if you were using an alternative hook, you definitely need to bend down the barb.
Barb sometimes can get in the way for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely does. The Daiichi 2461 works really well. The Gallup hook works really well. I use them on an Airex hook really well. Anything, I just like the straight eye and that Aberdeen bend. So that's what we're looking for to get over the top of that on that side there. I'm working on a saltwater alternative to this hook that would allow for me to not have to drill out the bead. It works if I have to drill out the beads or melt them out or any of those things, but I'm trying to find an alternative that would allow me to put it as a shrimp pattern because it works really well for that. So okay, so we're going to do a kind of a hybrid of coloration into the brown and olive, and this is one of my favorite colorations to fish around here. And this is 140 denier Beavis power thread in brown. And I don't like this pattern to be real heavy. My go-to on this is to have brass eyes on it. It's a very dense fly. It does have some flutter in this. This one flutters a little bit more than the standard one just because it has a little more material on it. But what I like is these black nickel, just brass eyes. If you want to rotate these out for some lead eyes, definitely go ahead and do that. But I'll find that I'll fish this most of the time on an intermediate sink line with just the brass. And what I'm doing is I'm kicking it up and letting it kind of flutter down, kick it up, let it flutter down. And man, they just crush this thing. So I'm going to take it on. I'm going to go ahead and put my eyes. This does fish hook point up. And you can put a weed guard on this. I typically don't see that it's necessary for the waters that I'm fishing. I'm fishing this a lot of the times. And if you want a full recap of how I like to fish this, this is in Pat Cohen's bass book called Super Bass Flies. It's also in, I believe, Jake Villock's smallmouth book in there. And then it's going to be in, I believe, Tim Jacobs is going to put it in. He's working on a new book as well for largemouth flies. But this is a great pattern to fish over the top of or on the edges of weed beds where those bass are going to hide and just come out and crush this thing on the out of the beds. So I'm just going to put a little bit of a thread base underneath. You have to be careful on this that you don't make that so big that the beads won't come on top of it. It just gives something when we're locking down these beads for those to lock down into so that it doesn't slide. Okay, so I'm going to come all the way back up here to the dumbbell eyes. And the reason I like these dumbbell eyes is I can kind of push that bead into the recess of those eyes. Okay, and so I'm going to take my thumbnail, and this is how to get them to where they're not going to spin or move on you. And that's kind of the biggest trick of this whole fly, is to make sure that you know when we can tie this in and it's not going to rotate or move on you. Okay, so what I did was I put my thumb up against it. I'm going to hop the thread over the top of it, and then I'm going to create a little dam. If you've ever tied Charlie Craven's 2-bit hooker, it's the same kind of philosophy of where you're making a little bit of space in between the beads, and all you're doing is button up against that bead, and each one of these is going to push this bead and this material further towards the part that's not going to move. So you're creating rigidity and security each time that you're doing this. So this is all the way up against that bump of thread, and I'm going to pull it over, and I'm just going to create a little dam right up against there. Okay, now that's not going to move anywhere. I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to hop over, and I'm going to create a little dam of thread, and that keeps it from sliding back and forth. Oh, caught my hook. All right, so a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and tie those up. I'm not worried about them being super even because we're going to cover up some of this. It's going to create a nice ramp for some of our materials as well. Okay, we're going to go back to that buggerboo that we used in the other pattern as well. This is the same stuff, buggerboo mini barred olive brown, 2.5 or 2 inch, and I'm going to grab 2 pieces out of here. If you have one that's really thick, obviously just use one, but most of these are nice and wispy and they look great. All right, so I'm going to take a couple pieces and I'm just going to line them up so that the tips are even with each other. Okay, so even though I've got 2 different lengths of marabou here, the tips are nice and equal with each other, and so when I tie them in, they're going to be the same. Okay, you can tie them in one at a time if you want. Otherwise, I just go ahead and stroke it forward so that I've got a nice even bunch, and then if there's anything I need to alter, if it's off, I can go ahead and pull it out and do it again. You know what? I think that feather's just weird. I was like, man, the tips won't line up. And it's just that feather has a weird thing to it. There we go. All right, so what I'm looking at is I want them just about 3/4 of a hook shank. Don't want it a full hook shank. I just want a little bit of a 3/4 to a half. And I'm going to put that down right on top, which will be the bottom of the fly. Okay, so these are going to be kind of some of the mouth parts, some of the things that are heading out the back end or the front end, because this is the head of the crayfish. And we can start to put in some of our legs and things. I like to, when I fish these in my own box, I put a whole bunch of different colors of legs in there. But what I'm looking for is to match kind of the color scheme of this. On this one, you got brown and olives. I'm going to look for greens and browns. This is kind of a root beer colored with some green chrome. So I'm going to take 4. I'll fold them around. And I'm just going to pull one side over and then capture it on the other side. Okay. And I'm just going to let those kind of dangle out the front. I put a set of legs on the front or underneath the claws, and then a set of legs on top of the claws. So this is what differs kind of in this version 2 is a little bit of extra stuff going on. If I was just tying the first portion, I just do one set of legs with the hackles, and we're good to go. On the second one, I like to have a little bit of claws. Slows down the descent of the fall of the fly. It also gives a little bit more realism to it. But these are pheasant rump. Okay, the pheasant rump on here, I have one olive color and I have one orange color, and I like to put a little bit of orange in my crayfish patterns. And so what this is going to do is the orange is going to face inwards towards the tail, and the olive is going to face outwards towards the outside of the fly. So I'll do the near side for me first, and I'm going to put it just a little bit short of the mouth parts and all of the stuff going on in the front there. Okay. Move it around, make sure that you've got it them even, lock them into place. And I don't like to strip the materials because I think it weakens the stem of it. Okay, so I'm going to take these, I'm going to put them, match them up, make sure they're even. Okay, so we've got some claws hanging out the side there. Those are a little bit more rigid than the marabou. So when this thing gets wet, those stick out. The claws, I don't like the claws to be really big. I like to have suggestive claws, but they don't need to be really large. And so, I mean, I do have some patterns that have like the big rabbit strip on them, and I think that those have their place in different things. But I like to have small, more reserved claws on my crayfish patterns. Okay, so a lot of our crayfish around here have some blue in them, and I think that that's a really good target color for what we have in our crayfish. And so I really like these fly enhancer legs in a light blue and pumpkin, and I put those into most, if not all, of my crayfish patterns in this color combination. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take four pieces, same thing that I did earlier, but these are going to be on top of the claws, and they help that kind of splay out just a little bit. Okay, and I can clip those a little bit short, kind of act like some extra in the claws, gives it a little bit extra profile in there. And so this backside is really, you can vary the color really easily. The rest of this is all going to be, this is whiting American Rooster Saddle, and this is in the grizzly olive. And the reason I like this, number one, it's one of the most affordable pelts that you can get from whiting. But the other thing that I really like about it is that you get a variety of different sizes on it. So down here at the bottom, towards the head of the chicken, you get some nice short fibers or some short feathers that are going to be really nice for even some tails on some saltwater stuff, as well as all the way down here, you can find some really, really long fibers towards the end of it that are, I mean, that's pretty stinking long. And so you got a variety of different sizes up and through here. The thing I like about American rooster is the fact that it's webby like schlappen, but it's stiffer like saddle. And so you get a nice variety of density within the feather. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna pick something that's a little bit bigger and webby, and we're gonna make hackle segments all the way down through these junction points of the beads, and it's gonna create a nice tapered, rounded effect to the crayfish, and it's gonna get. We want it to get smaller as we go towards the tail of the crayfish. So your biggest feather is going to be up here at the top. Okay. And when I tie in these, I want to go up towards the tip. These are the stiffest of the hackle fibers, and I'm going to use those fibers to hold up some of the profile of the ones behind it that are a little bit softer and more supple. Okay. So I'm going to start this out, and I'm just going to kind of get them started by the same way with that wet fly, kind of folding them back. Make sure that you don't get your rubber legs all messed up in there. But then I'm going to take this, and the shorter fibers are actually going to hold up some of the longer fibers as they progress, and you'll get a nice profile once this gets wet and starts to swim. Okay, so now we're kind of in that webby kind of schlappen kind of feel to it. And when I go to tie this off, I can just tie it off just like I would any other hackle right behind it, couple wraps on top. Okay. Clip off. And then if you want to, you can throw a half hitch or a whip finish in there. I just go ahead and cross over the bead because it's really hard to get in there with some teeth or anything like that with everything going on here. I never really have these come apart or get nicked or any of those things. So I just hop it across. If it makes you feel better to throw a whip finish in there, save your work, that's totally fine. Okay. I'm going to go one more right in here. What I've done is I've hopped over and created myself a little shelf. And I don't need but just a couple wraps on here. So when I'm looking at this feather, I'm looking at when I'm done with this, it should go about halfway into the previous section. Okay. So I'm going to go about halfway down this feather, and I'm going to cut it off at a little tip. And then I'm just going to do a couple wraps here. And what's nice about these beads is they catch a lot of light. So you'll see them through the kind of tannic water, as well as, through the really kind of some low light situations as well. Okay, so we've got two sections on top of there. I can go ahead and hop over to my next section, give myself a little shelf. Okay, and now I've gone to a longer feather, but it's got a lot more taper to it. Okay, so they're smaller up here at the top. And you notice that it's a little bit less webby than some of the other ones. So it's a little bit stiffer fibers. Okay, so I'm going to roll this just a little bit to get it facing backwards. Trapped a couple fibers in there. So this next section and then the section after that is just a little bit more sparse. And then when I hop this over, there's a little trick. If you go over here, that the eyes kind of get in the way, and you don't want to get down in there into that crook very easily. So I just take my fingernail and I push it down in there and kind of help it guide down into those eyes. Okay. So we're starting to get some of the profile here of the little bit of taper as it comes down. And then our last one here is I kind of go to the side here on the pelt, and I grab some of these thinner, more sparsely I guess the little stiffer hackled fibers down here. Grab one that's a little smaller. And I'm going to tie this in right up at the tip where the shortest fibers are going to be. And this one, because it goes up against the eyes, can be a little squirrely. I'll show you a trick and we can get them all facing backwards. So I'm just going to make it squirrely. Okay, so I'm giving it nice. They're kind of going all different directions. Okay, I'm going to capture it with one. I'm going to pinch my fingers, my first two fingers, in between on the front, and I'm going to pull the fly through it. What that does, it allows me to capture all of those fibers that are kind of going everywhere, and they're all within my control. And now what I can do is I can make a little thread dam right there on the front. And when I take it off, now they're all facing backwards. Okay, so a little bit of a trick there. What you can do, hop over to the last section, get yourself a whip finish. And that's your Mardi Craw. It is a great little pattern for largemouth, for smallmouth. Works incredibly well in moving water and in still water, and then also just kills it for trout as well. It's a very visible pattern. You can see what it's doing in the water, even in the darker colors, because of the beads. The beads are you can make them really bright. There's a guy that I tie for that loves them in black and red. Not fished as a crayfish, obviously, but black and red is a great color combination. There's a guy down in Texas that loved them for watermelon red, so that they're olive and red. I do them in probably 15 different colors. The ones that I fish the most are kind of this coloration, this kind of just straight tan and brown coloration, with some orange and barred brown on the backside. I really like that kind of tannish orange coloration. Straight orange has its place, though I'll tell you that there's not a lot of crayfish that are straight orange like this. I know that we get that kind of thought process that crayfish are orange, and they're just not. Orange
only after they're cooked.
Right, only after they're cooked, exactly.
Right.
But there are times where orange can be really effective in fishing. But when you're looking at naturals, I really don't. You don't see that very often. You'll see little spots of orange or orange in their claws. This is kind of that tan, but with a darker background side to it. There's a lot of different color combinations. When I look in the box that I typically throw, I've got a number of different colors. Like there's the watermelon red, so you got some red in the claws and some red in the face. Brown and orange, that little bit of orange in there. Like, I mean, that's nice. The kind of orange that I see is the smaller amounts of orange in there. I don't see the cooked crayfish orange, but there are people that really love throwing those things. This is a really popular color down in the southern parts that have that kind of orange in the front with some lighter in the back. And then I'll tell you, for some weird reason, this color right here is a great color. It's gold beads which are more like a tan coloration. It's not really, they call them gold, but they're more of like a tan color with some light olive colors in there, some olive claws, and then some chartreuse and blue in there. And for some weird reason, it fishes really well.
I think it's probably relative to water conditions. If the
Sure.
water's real muddy, then the chartreuse colors kind of tend to stand out.
Well, and we know that
And
chartreuse works really well in a lot of different ways. I mean,
right,
and chartreuse at depth, when we're talking about what the color spectrum does, and it changes. There's some really cool stuff online that you can see how I watched this video where it was talking about what colors change as they go through the light spectrum at depths. When we see lure fishermen and conventional fishermen that have used chartreuse constantly, right? And it's one of those things that's well, why does it work? Well, at light, I've heard it does yellow, and we know that yellow is a great effective pattern coloration for some of our smaller streamers. And so a lot of different color combinations in those, but it is one of my must. If I was put on an island, I'd probably have a Mardi Craw in my in my box. So yeah.